So anybody that doesn't know, I'm Louis Hecker from Hecker's Garden Centre, and today we're going to do a talk on 7 New Year's gardening resolutions. I know with our own resolutions we don't always get through with it, but I'm sure with our garden we can get it done. So one of the first ones we're going to talk about today is my favourite, mulching. As we know, mulching is such an important part of gardening, and especially if we think of this extreme weather that we're experiencing. What we normally use at Hecker's is our normal bark mulch, which we sell bagged. You can also use any of your own garden refuse as well. Because if you think about it, mulching is anything in nature that forms a layer on top of a soil. I always like to think of it, if you go to a bushveld or you go to a forest, there's nobody sweeping under the trees or cleaning up, and that's how nature actually keeps the soil good, by adding those layers on top constantly. I know sometimes we've been used with our gardening to have these clean, open beds, and we always get the guys to clean up every week, but that's actually the worst thing you can do for your garden, because with that soil being exposed on top, you lose a lot of the life in the soil, the microbes, all the little things that does the heavy lifting that we don't always see with the naked eye. So for this year, if possible, really look at mulching your garden. We also get a lot of queries where people want to know if they can use grass cuttings for mulching, and you can definitely use it, but rather wait for it to go brown, to dry out first, and then always add a different layer of mulch with the grass cuttings. What we always recommend is at least 2 to 3 parts brown mulch to 1 part green mulch, and if there's quite a lot of green mulch in there, I definitely recommend fertilizing that area, because as the mulch breaks down, it actually absorbs a lot of nitrogen from the soil. So adding a bit more nitrogen, a lot of people even prefer using lawn fertilizer. It just helps the process, helps it to break down faster. With mulching as well, a lot of the mulch you have to replace every few years, but the benefit of that is as you replace the mulch, the old mulch starts breaking down, and that actually becomes compost for your garden. So if your garden soil is in a good space and it's a healthy, good loamy soil, and you just keep on mulching every year, you never actually have to add compost to your garden. Because as that mulch breaks down, that becomes compost. If we have to think of the benefits of mulching, the first one for me would definitely be water saving. And as we talked about earlier, we're sitting with big water problems parts of the country. Here by us, dams are full. I think last I saw the Vol Dam sitting on 102%. But it's scary to think just 2 years ago, I think the level was lowest, I think at 11 or 13%. So it could be just a matter of months or a year where we could be back in that situation if the rains don't come through. So the sooner we start mulching and getting our gardens ready for possible drought in the future, the better. So the biggest part is the water saving, and it's actually been proved that you can save up to 50% on your watering if you use a mulch effectively. So just imagine having to cut down your water bill for your garden by 50%. That'll make a massive difference. Also important with mulching, if you've got bigger trees or shrubs, never have the mulch right up against the base. Always just leave a small area open around it. For your smaller perennials and your shrubs, it normally doesn't matter, but for your bigger, harder stem plants, always just a small barrier in between. The other big benefit of using mulch is also less weeds. Because what the mulch actually does, it helps suppress the weeds, but you've got that layer on top, and as the weed seeds germinate, they can't penetrate through that layer. So you save a lot of time in your garden by mulching, no more weeding. You'll still have a few pop through here and there, but a lot less than if you wouldn't use a mulch. Another big benefit as well is it keeps the roots cool in summer, so the sun isn't baking on the soil and on the roots directly. And then the other benefit is also in winter, where you end up keeping the roots warm as well, where it forms like a blanket on top of the soil, keeping them nice and warm. And let's just see as a quick one, by show of hands, who's actually mulching their garden. That's good, but I think next talk we're going to have, I want all those hands up. Like I say, the first one, mulching, so important. Another big part of it is also it prevents soil erosion, where especially with these big storms that we're having in our garden, you find you can lose a lot of soil, especially if it's not on even ground. So mulching is also a great way to not lose your precious topsoil. And then another part where people are realizing mulch adds a great advantage is just the aesthetics of it, where if you maybe think of using different colored mulches, you can create a beautiful effect in your garden. And it just looks, to me personally, it looks more complete and more neat as well. With autumn also coming up in a few months, very important, don't throw away all your leaf litter. I always find nature gives us this beautiful supply of mulch in autumn with all the leaves dropping. Gather those leaves, put them on top of the soil. They're going to become a mulch and start breaking down in time. So again, nature gives us a beautiful supply that time of year. So on to our next one, which is going to be gardening for pollinators. I think we all know how important pollinators are, not just for us human beings, but for the whole of nature. If we didn't have pollinators, we wouldn't have any food. It's gotten so bad in places around the world with pollution, especially with them losing a lot of the bee population, that you even find that they have to pollinate by hand. One can just imagine what that does to the cost of it. If we look at some of our favorite pollinators, and you always find there's always a beautiful flowering plant, so not just great for the bees, but great for our eyes as well. One of my favorites is your Anisodontia, your pink mallow. It produces masses and masses of these beautiful pink flowers. On a warm sunny day, you can just see all the bees buzzing around it. It's also a beautiful indigenous shrub. Can get quite tall and leggy, so I'd always recommend with it, once it gets a bit too tall, leggy, and it looks a bit unneat, chop it back, give it a good haircut. It'll constantly reshoot again. So this is also great if you want to add a bit of height to your garden, especially towards the back. And then interesting as well is your coneflower family. Your beautiful echinaceas and the yellow rudbeckias. I always say the rudbeckias are, for me personally, better than using sunflowers. I think we all want those beautiful bright yellow sunflowers in our garden. Only downside with sunflowers is they're annuals. So they only last one season after flowering, they go down. Whereas with your rudbeckias, they're what we call a herbaceous perennial. So every year they die down during winter. If we have a good enough cold, springtime they come up again. So with both of these, if you've got them in your garden and they disappear in winter, don't worry, they're not gone. They're going to come back again the next year. And I find with both of these, the longer they're in your garden, the bigger and more beautiful of a show they give you. Interesting enough with this year, because we grow these ourselves, is we find they're almost a month and a half late for bringing them in. So it just shows that weather we had with the cooler temperatures at night and all the rain we had, it actually slowed down the plants. But finally we've got them back in stock. Another favorite, your beautiful goras, your butterfly bushes, and you can see both types of pink and the white one. Probably one of the most free flowering shrubs. They just continue flowering. Only bit of maintenance, give them a haircut, they reshoot and they reflower again. Hardy as well, it's one of those things you put in your garden and virtually forget about them. They just keep on going year after year. You can also bring in a lot of annuals for the pollinators, things like salvia, old favorite cosmos. You can see it popping up all over in the veld now as well. Also excellent for pollinators. And then another option one can also think of is sowing for pollinators as well. So there's a lot of the seed packets that you get these beautiful mixes out of, and then Mayfair has also brought through a meadow mix, which is perfect for pollinators, which you can sow into bigger open areas of the garden, nice sunny spots, and this will create a beautiful show, a nice blend, perfect for the pollinators. And then interesting, we tend to only think of insects as our pollinators, mainly bees and butterflies, but did you know some mammals actually play a very important role in pollinating? A great example for me is always those beautiful agaves that produce those long, tall flower spikes. And what actually pollinates them is bats. So the bats that fly around, they eat the nectar from the flowers, and as they move from the flower to the flower, they actually get the pollen and they help to pollinate them. And also quite interesting, in Madagascar, when Charles Darwin was still around, he was having a look there and he saw this beautiful flower, Ariangus orchid, that probably had a flower stamen that was about 30 centimeters long. And then he said that somewhere there's got to be something that actually pollinates it. And then I think about 20 years after his death, they actually found the moth. They called it a Darwin moth, that's got a proboscis that folds up, that it can reach up to 30 centimeters in length. So for every flower that's unusual or something's a bit different, there's a reason for it, and there's a pollinator for it as well. Sometimes rats and mice can even play an important role in pollinating as well. So it just goes to show all the different pollinators out there, and I think it's a big movement around the world where people are actually planting for pollinators. We're realizing the stress that the bee populations are under. The biggest threat that we're facing is habitat loss, where a lot of the habitat gets destroyed either for farming developments or housing or factories. There's so many ways we manage to mess it up with. So habitat loss, and that's where it's so important. If we can create these mini little habitats in our gardens, we can really help those populations out. Another big part is also climate change. Changing climate, the pollinators are really struggling. I know the beekeepers here on the Highveld are finding that all the rain and the cooler weather we've had, that the bees haven't been as busy. They actually need the warmer temperatures to work at their best. Let's hope with the heat and the sun coming through now, things will go back to normal. They are very important. I think we've all got to do our own little bit for pollinators. Then the third garden resolution that we're going to move on to is to go organic. I know organic's always such a buzzword, but what does organic actually mean? To me personally, gardening organic is to garden more with nature and not against nature. And I would always say the starting point in going organic is your soil. If we think about it, the soil is the foundation of our gardens. That's where we plant our plants in, that's the home that they stay in. And if your soil isn't healthy, your plants aren't going to be healthy. So very important that when we garden, we rather look at using organic products. The advantage of using organic products is it builds up your soil. It improves your soil constantly. I always like to think of it like a snowball effect, where the more you use it and the longer you use it, it just gets better and better and better, the benefits. If we used to think about it in the old days, we always used to use superphosphate for planting. And we're actually finding that superphosphate isn't that good for the soil, where a lot of the farms that have been using chemical fertilizers years and years, they're finding their soils are becoming depleted. They've got to use increasing volumes of fertilizer every year to get the same yield. So it's almost like you're farming backwards, if one can say in that manner. Here at Hecker's, I think this year we're also going to stop selling superphosphate. We find also that consumers are moving away from the chemical products more and more. I would always still say there's always still a place for it here and there, but where possible, go organic. You'll definitely see the benefits. The first one that we're actually going to talk about is the whole different Talborn range of products. I know we've also had them out for talks here at the Garden Centre, and the whole Talborn team are just so passionate about going organic and especially looking at soil health. So you've got a few different options. When you plant your seedlings, you can use your seedling food when planting. This will give them that quick boost that they need to get settled. It'll last for up to 2 months in your garden, and to me it's perfect to use when you do your planting. That just gives them that quick head start. Then the other products in the range, the red bag, the Vita flower, this is always for your flowering plants. So if you want your roses to flower better, or your pollinating plants to give more flowers for the bees, or just to get a bigger crop out of your tomatoes, this would be the perfect one to use. Then you've got your green bag, which is a Vita green. So this contains quite a bit of nitrogen. So this is going to be perfect for if you want to get your lawn to grow a bit quicker and lusher, if you want your trees to go faster. So always think the green, that's for your green growth. Then the orange bag, that's your vita veg. So this is perfectly formulated for your vegetable garden. And the other big advantage of using organics is you use it less frequently. Because these are naturally occurring minerals, it stays in the soil a lot longer. So you only end up using it every 3 to 4 months, whereas we find if you compare it with chemical fertilizers, you have to use it on a monthly basis. So it ends up lasting you a lot longer in your garden, and I find that it's more slow release as well, so you actually find you get more sustained growth instead of that quick burst and then it stops again. So the dosage really helps. Normally find the dosage works on about 100 gram, a handful per square meter. So with these 2 kg bags, you'll be able to do about 20 square meters in your garden. Then they've also got their bone meal, which is also certified organic as well. Goes through a whole procedure. So this you use when you do your planting. Always try and get it close to the roots. So you find your phosphates are very, very stationary elements. It's something where a lot of times we have customers that every year go and they sprinkle bone meal on top of their soil, which is actually a waste. It doesn't get through to where the roots are. So bone meal always has its place, but always when planting. So when you plant your seedlings or a tree or shrub or some veggies, try and get it in close to the roots. It's definitely going to work a lot better then. And then they've also got their General 232, which you can also use when you do your planting as well, or if you just want to give some general maintenance to your plants, and this is also a perfect one to use. They've also got a lovely range of liquid fertilizers. Again, the green cap, this is more for your foliage plants. Blue cap, this is more of a general. And then the last one, your red cap, this is for your flowering plants. Also great for orchids. Nice thing about it, it's also produced locally in South Africa, and you wouldn't believe, but it's actually produced from sugar beets. So it's completely sustainable. Actually reminds me of Marmite when you open it up. It's got that same smell. And then we've also got, I'm sure you've all seen the samples of a Bio-Rock, which is an Atlantic product. It's a lovely fertilizer that you use when planting as well. And the nice thing about it is it doesn't attract the dogs. And I can really vouch for it. I've actually used it in my garden with our 2 sausage dogs, and they haven't dug around it. So I think that's definitely passed the test, because with the Dutch hounds, they like their digging quite a bit. So if you've got pets and they have a habit of digging in your garden when you do your planting, and I always say when using bone meal with pets, it's like adding biltong into your garden. They smell it and they dig after it. So if you have that problem, use the Bio-Rock, that one right in the middle there with the red. That'll help with the planting, and you won't have the dogs digging them out. Interesting enough, they actually use it quite extensively in agriculture as well. A lot of the winelands there in the Cape, a lot of the, if you think of the Elgin Valley, all the apple trees and the pears, that's actually where it started, and now it started coming through to customers so we can actually use it in our gardens. Then they've also got their lawn range, their fruit and flower, their general, and their Bio Ocean, which is also a very good product. These are all chicken manure based products, so it's made from chicken manure that goes through a whole procedure to make sure that it doesn't burn your garden. Because that's always a problem if you use chicken manure on its own. It's got high nitrogen, can burn very easily, but this goes through a whole procedure so you don't have to worry about that at all. And again, same principle applies every 3rd month that you'd feed with it. So that's one part with feeding and looking after our soil. Also again, mulching is going to be one of the best ways that you can improve your soil. So through using organic fertilizers, fertilizing, and composting. If your soil isn't that healthy, you have to add that organic material. Once your soil is healthy and in good texture, then you just maintain it with the mulch and the fertilizer. So there's no need to, every year, to dig in copious amounts of compost, when sometimes with gardening it's the only thing you do. You just keep on adding compost and compost the whole time. but using compost, conjunction with organic fertilizer and regular mulching, that'll maintain your soil and keep it healthy. Another part of going organic is to use safer products in the garden. I think that's something we're always worried about, and I think that's also a lot of times where we tend to grow our own produce as well, is to get away from the stuff that's grown with these harmful chemicals. So a lot of the organic options you find, it's a lot more preventative. So the trick there is to apply more regularly, especially on your spray side. I would recommend apply at least twice a week. And if you've got plants that you know are prone to diseases, things like roses that get aphids, they get mealybug, they get the beetles attacking them, it's actually better to spray preventatively, at least once every second week. Sorry. So the one option one can use is the neem oil, and this is quite an interesting product. This is made from the neem tree that comes from India. And how people actually realized this has got insect repellent properties is probably thousands of years ago, then you'd have these massive locust swarms moving through the areas and they devastate everything, but people saw they didn't touch the neem tree. Then they started growing their crops in between the neem trees as a natural repellent. Luckily for us, we don't have to plant the tree. We can just use the extract called azoractin, and it's actually the nut that they get that oil from. Nice thing with the neem oil, it's what we call a suffocant, where it actually smothers the insects, so they can't breathe, they die off, it washes off quickly, then your plants are happy, they can breathe again. And the nice thing especially about the neem oil, it doesn't build up resistance. That's very important, especially with a lot of the hojas in our garden and the pests that we struggle with. If you use the same product every time, the generations of those pests going forward actually build up a bit of resistance. I don't know if you guys have experienced it, but you spray like you normally do and it doesn't seem as effective. The reason for that could be that population that you have has built up a natural resistance. So very important, nice thing to remember, they can't build up a resistance with a neem oil. So this is a very good all-rounder. You can use it indoors as well. A lot of people even use it as a leaf shine, perfect for that use as well. Then other options that we can look at is Kershaw's has got this nice new organokill spray, which the active ingredient is pyrethrin. It's got a nice citrusy smell as well. So this is a safer aerosol can that one can use. You can spray it on your vegetables, you can use it indoors. If you use it on your veggies, after 3 days it's completely safe to use. It's just a lot handier and easier to use, no mixing or anything like that. So this is a nice quick solution. Then you can also look at something like your Ludwig insect spray. I must say this is probably the most popular organic insecticide at the moment. And this contains pyrethrin, which is a natural insecticide made from your pyrethrin daisy. Then it contains garlic extract, which acts as a repellent. That garlicky smell helps to chase away the hojas. I normally find I start getting quite hungry when I spray this with that smell of the garlic, so maybe expect a bit of munchies after spraying this. And then the other active that it's got is canola oil, which would have the same aspect where it also smothers the insects. So again, you can use this preventatively or as you see the pests. And then one has to remember certain pests are a bit more tenacious. Things like your red spider and your whitefly, because they've got such a fast breeding cycle. If you only spray once every second week, by the time you spray again, that population has recovered so quickly. So especially with those two pests, I'd always recommend spraying a 6-day cycle, day 1, day 3, day 6. Then you can give it a week or two's rest, inspect your plants. If you notice that, complete that cycle again. So if you struggle to get rid of things like red spider, thrips and your whitefly, remember spray more frequently, then you'll give that population the knock that it needs. And then something I think we've all been struggling with this year is mosquitoes, mozzies. Any bit of open water we've got, and with all the rain, there's puddles and ponds everywhere. You can use this biological mosquito insecticide, and what this actually contains is it's called Bacillus pharyngeus, which is a naturally occurring bacteria And this specific type of bacillus only attacks mosquito larvae. So those little hookers you'll see under the water before they turn into a mosquito, this will kill them off. It doesn't affect any other aquatic life, completely safe to use, and you'd apply it as a spray that you spray over the cover of the water. So a great option for mosquitoes. Then more or less the same product, but the biological caterpillar insecticide, also the Bacillus thuringiensis, but a different strain that attacks caterpillars. So this is especially good for the lily borers, I think, which has been becoming a bigger and bigger pest every year. What we've also been finding is that they're attacking agapanthus as well, which they normally never used to touch them. They're starting to attack them as well. Big thing to remember with this, it's not as effective against adult caterpillars. So this you'd only spray when they're still small. I normally recommend applying this at the beginning of the season, around September, before they get too big, and this would also give you season-long protection because that bacterium is going to be there and active the whole time. Just remember, don't always think of all caterpillars as the bad guys. Sometimes we spray some of our most beautiful caterpillars that have the potential to turn into beautiful moths or butterflies. So I would only recommend really looking at the things that can be pests. Your two main ones would be your lily borer, that striped caterpillar, that is a real bad pest. And then your other one would be your army caterpillars that normally move in a group. Those would be the only two I'd really worry about. A lot of your other caterpillar populations, they don't breed as much, and the damage they do, I always think of nature's pruning. They'll munch the leaves a bit here and there, they'll never kill off a tree, and it almost acts like a natural pruning, and then you've got the benefit of those beautiful moths and butterflies. And if one's not sure if something's a pest, pop through to the nursery or send us a WhatsApp with a picture, and we'll be able to identify it for you from there. Then if we move on to our fungicides, and I think this year this has been our bigger problem in the garden. It's not the insects as much, because you find with your insects, the warmer and the drier it is, insects become more of a pest. The colder and wetter it is, then fungal diseases become more of a problem. So you've got two options there, the copper count, which is a copper-based fungicide. Again, I would recommend spray preventatively on things like roses, your pumpkins, all those things that are prone to getting things like the mildew or the black spot. Rather spray preventatively to stop it from getting a hold on your plants. Where I find with funguses, if it's on there and you spray, you don't normally get rid of that part. It's best to sometimes cut those leaves off and to protect the new leaves coming through. Normally in your pumpkin patch, you'll have the older leaves that start first with getting that white mildew on it. Don't even spray those, cut them off and protect the young leaves, then it won't even spread from there. So the copper is a bit the stronger one, and then they've also got their natural organic fungicide, which is a bit of a softer product as well. A lot of people also prefer using this indoors, and you can also use it as a table cleaner as well, as a disinfectant. So it's got a lot of different uses. So that's a bit more on the different organics. So I definitely find with using the right organic fertilizer, using the right pesticides, we find you can make such a difference because we don't end up killing everything. We only kill what we need to, and to kill as little as possible. Because to actually have a healthy garden that's in a good, healthy organic state, you always need a small population of pests. Because they're food for the predators, the butterflies, the dragonflies, all the things that will be attacking those little pests. The ladybug's always a good example. They're such voracious defenders of our garden. If we keep on spraying too much, we kill them as well, or we kill off all the potential hookers they could be eating, and they've got no food and they die off again. So never be too scared if you've got a little bit of pests in your garden. I'd only recommend spraying if it becomes an outbreak or a real big quantity of it, then it'll be necessary. So with these different principles, we can really get our garden in a healthy state. I think this year as well, myself and Chanel's been fighting a continuous battle with snails this year. They've just been coming up in hordes. We almost had snail hunting every second, third night. Go out with a torch, catch them and squash them. But yeah, it can feel a bit violent at times. So if one's not up for squashing them, then you could always use your pheromone, which is an organic snail bait. This, interesting enough, is pasta that's been infused with iron. And that iron is too much for the snails. They can't digest and they die off. A lot safer to use, especially if you've got pets. So if they get a hold of this, it won't harm them at all. And the other advantage is you also don't get secondary poisoning, where if a snail's got this in and a hadida or bird comes and eats it, he won't get poisoned from that snail. Other great advantage of it, it's more water fast. So normally the problem with your traditional snail baits, as soon as we get a bit of rain or moisture, it breaks down and it's not effective anymore. Nice thing with a pheromone, it can go at least 3 to 4 watering or rains before it starts breaking down. So it also lasts you quite a bit longer in the garden. So next up from, I think also following up from going organic, is also to grow your own food. I mean, that's becoming a bigger and bigger movement around the world. A big part of it, I think, is people that are trying to move away from the store-bought produce, where a lot of times it's grown with a lot of chemicals, the things that get sprayed over it. So growing your own food is a great way to actually get more healthy, nutrient-dense food into our bodies. Another part, I think, is also just the taste of growing your own is so much better. To me, the best example is always the difference between a store-bought tomato and a homegrown tomato. The one tastes like a tomato, the other one tastes like cardboard. Virtually doesn't have any taste. Whereas if you grow your own, it really has got such a better taste to it. I think a big part of also growing your own isn't to try and become self-sustainable or to try and grow everything oneself. To me, the goal is actually more just to reduce your reliance on store-bought produce. A great example I always use is just growing your own spinach and lettuce, which you don't need a big space for it. It continuously produces. The more you harvest, the more it produces. And there already you can cut down your fresh produce bill by 30 to 40%. So I don't know about you guys, but if I buy from the shops, I always end up throwing it away. You use it for one meal, next day it's going off already and you've got to chuck it out. Always great for the compost heap, but if you grow it yourself, you pick and you only harvest what you need. And it's fresh every day. I think another big advantage of also growing yourself is just the therapy that it gives. Just that time busy, that 10-15 minutes every day in the vegetable garden. It's a bit of exercise and I find a bit of therapy as well. So for growing oneself, one can always grow in the soil. Look at doing hang baskets as well. Makes it a lot easier. I find things like your cherry tomatoes, you can do them in baskets, they'll cascade and droop over. Also makes the harvesting easier. Things like beans as well, where normally we grow them in the soil and have them grow up. Things like your bush beans, and you've got to bend down to harvest. Try and raise the height. Then it makes the harvesting a lot easier and also less work in the garden as well. And the other big advantage, you keep it away from pests as well. They're less prone to go for things in hang baskets. It just makes the gardening part a lot easier. Another thing we've always got to think of with growing our own food is, again, to work with nature, not against nature. We're using companion planting. And I think the best example for me is always our beautiful bright marigolds. Putting them in between your vegetable patch, they've got almost like that khaki bush-like smell. That helps to repel pests. And the roots also give off, in the soil, it helps to repel things like nematodes, all those critters in the soil. So think of companion planting, adding some marigolds or some wild garlic in your vegetable garden, and use nature to help you out instead of working against nature. And it also gives you a lot of extra color in your garden as well. Then you even get things like our nasturtiums, the kapekis that we know, and they're actually what you'd call a trap plant, where you plant them in between beautiful for edible flowers. You can use the flowers in salads, and they're a plant that things like aphids would be more prone to attack them than your other plants. So planting in there and actually allowing the aphids to go to them keeps them off your other plants, and it'll also be a source of food then for things like ladybugs and the hojas that help us out in our gardens. So using those little tricks, we can actually just make our vegetable gardens so much easier. So moving on from the vegetable gardens, I think the thing we've got to look at is planting a tree. It's something that's very sad for me. Year after year, we see the tree sales going down here at Hecker's. I think a big part of it is we don't always have space in our gardens. That's the biggest challenge that we're actually sitting with. We can't plant a lot of these beautiful trees because we don't always have the space. And luckily this year, the tree of the year for South Africa is our wild olive, the Udulea africana. It's a beautiful, hardy, evergreen indigenous tree. And the benefit about this, it's perfect for even pots. And that's something we don't always think of, but we can actually grow trees in pots, especially smaller trees like the wild olives. Again, the size of a pot would dictate the size of the tree, but at least a nice 40 to 50 centimeter pot, you'd get it up to 2 meters easily. You can shape it as well, and especially where we're sitting with a lot of patios and verandas that don't always have cover, and it's just that harsh sun whole day, every day. Planting a tree in a pot would actually give you some lovely shade to enjoy as well. But planting trees, not just any trees, but indigenous trees, also makes a massive difference. So if one has got the space in the garden, it would really be a nice one to help nature out to plant a tree this year. If one's not sure about what tree to look at, you could always come in with some pictures of the area, the lighting, and then we can recommend a tree that will be perfect in that area. Then one should think, should you be using an evergreen tree or deciduous tree? Something we always find people always prefer to go for the evergreen trees because it gives you cover the whole year round. But if it's in an area where you want to plant, where you want the sun to come through in winter and warm the house, rather use a deciduous tree. We've got such an abundance of beautiful trees in South Africa. There's one that would cater for any garden and for any need. So yeah, let's look at planting a tree this year. If you don't have the space to plant your own tree, you could always think about donating a tree as well, to schools, to community initiatives, friends and family. And if you think about it, if you plant a tree, you're actually catering for the future, helping the future, providing more oxygen, and just making sure that future generations can also enjoy the beautiful trees and nature that we have in South Africa. Another one to think of is to mount a nesting log in the garden. See, we've got these nesting logs here in front. That's also becoming a big part of gardening, is to garden to attract birds to our gardens. So nesting logs, very important. Never have them facing north. Then it gets too hot in there and they can actually, I wouldn't say cook, but it gets too hot inside those nesting logs for them then. It's always rather on the southern side. Always put it up with a binding wire to make sure that it's nice and tight. And something that we sometimes find happening with these sisal nesting logs is that the top actually rots away and then the water gets in there. Easy trick to use for that is just use one of those plastic drip trays, put it on top, and then the water can't get in there. An important part as well for nesting logs is to make sure, where possible, try and put it in the quietest part of your garden. If you put it right by your front door where it's too busy, a lot of people coming in and out, cars, the birds won't be as inclined to move in there. So rather try and look at a more secluded part of the garden, a quieter part, and you'll definitely have a lot more visitors coming in there. And then my last one, probably my favorite one, is plant a speckworm. You all know how speckworm crazy I am, but something to think of, planting a speckworm in the garden if you haven't got one already. The beautiful thing about our speckworm, let me actually pick one up here, is not only does it look beautiful, this is such a nice succulent It's also one of the best plants in converting carbon dioxide into oxygen. I was lucky enough to go through to Eastern Cape this year and seeing them grow in their natural habitat, where it looks like these speculum forests, and there you even find them going into flower. They get these beautiful, beautiful pink flowers. So that's their natural habitat. But for us in our gardens, we can use them in our gardens as well. A lot of people even use them as a short hedge. They were perfect for that. Or then just in our succulent gardens. Some people even use them on a patio veranda. And the beautiful thing with speculum is it's the greatest gift you could give somebody. You can always take cuttings so easily, break a piece off, let it dry out for a day or two in the soil, and it grows from there. And you can even use it for eating as well. It's got a nice, bitter, slightly acidic flavor. Always use the fresh leaves, and you can add them to salads. I even bought a lovely speculum chutney a few years ago. Finished it up so quickly, it had such a lovely taste to it. But yeah, I would always say one always has to find a space for speculum in your garden. And also great to make your own gifts to give to friends and family. It really is such a thoughtful gift. But yeah, that's it for my 7 gardening New Year's resolutions. I hope you can at least adopt one of them in the garden. And let's see, I always leave a